First tonight, is the Qantas matter having a ripple-down effect on the way other employers are handling industrial disputes? It could be the case in Victoria, where there's a major stoush between nurses and the state government. The nurses want better wages and conditions, and they took work bans over the weekend, closing hundreds of Victorian hospital beds. The state government says their campaign's placing patient safety at serious risk, and it's gone to the independent umpire, Fair Work Australia, to have the work bans lifted, a move not dissimilar to the Qantas strategy. National Affairs correspondent Heather Hewitt reports.
It's a dispute that's dragged on for weeks, but appeared to gather momentum soon after the Qantas grounding and threatened lockout of workers.
I think it has been intensified, obviously, by the Qantas action.
We kind of predicted that after Qantas. We thought, well, if they saw how that went, so perhaps the state government will feel the same way and see the results from that. I mean, that stopped industrial action, so if that's what they want to do, that's what they'll do to get it.
I wish maybe the government could actually come onto the wards and see the patient support and their family members. It's just unbelievable.
By the time they rallied last Friday, a vote by Victorian nurses to apply work bans in state hospitals was overwhelming. They want an 18.5% pay rise over 3 years and 8 months, and the preservation of nurse-patient ratios. Tensions had built all week after reported plans of a lockout seized on by the ACTU and the federal government.
Well, I think there's no doubt that we saw the Victorian government considering a Qantas-style lockout or a Qantas-style response to industrial action.
And I was appalled when I read the circular that suggested that there be a lockout, that they start harassing nurses by photographing them and taking down their car registrations. I mean, that's a terrible approach to take to industrial relations.
It's hard to imagine that they would have been prepared to go ahead with that, but it would have been an equivalent to the Qantas strategy.
The Victorian government strongly denied the option was under consideration. But by mid-morning today, with the nurses' bans shutting down 700 beds over the weekend, public hospitals had applied to Fair Work Australia to terminate the industrial action, claiming community safety was at risk. The Health Minister flagged these intentions yesterday afternoon.
There is a threat to patient safety and welfare, and the Victorian government is not prepared to stand by and allow that to occur.
I don't believe the industrial action the nurses are taking is necessary. I'm certainly of the view that it is not good for patients' welfare, health or safety, and we will be supporting the appropriate action at Fair Work Australia.
Could you see this action coming?
Yes, we could, because on the 5th of May, the Minister signed off on a Cabinet in confidence document which outlined very strongly that the government was wanting to go to arbitration rather than negotiate an outcome.
It was always possible that the dispute would end up going in this direction. What may have changed is that Qantas being so aggressive and so opportunistic in using the provisions to bring a long-running dispute to an end may certainly cause some employers to think about employing this tactic a little earlier than they might otherwise have done.
And that's what everyone in the industrial relations world is now wondering. Has the Qantas example emboldened some employers to play it tougher, finding ways to speed up getting a dispute before the independent umpire, Fair Work Australia, for compulsory arbitration, instead of a long and slow bargaining process?
I think it's certainly put that style of response, a Qantas style of response, in their minds, in the forefront of their strategy.
Look, I don't think so. I mean, I just don't see most employers thinking that locking out their workforce and shutting down their business is a sensible response to protected industrial action. There are better alternatives.
I don't know when Alan Joyce determined his strategy, but I'm confident that, given that our state government is actually playing out exactly the same way, it would be something that even our state government may try with other public sector workers in this state.
Do you think that is likely to happen?
Well, let's see how we go.
Certainly, Qantas have created a new tactic, which is rather than waiting for industrial action by employees to get to the point where there's a significant threat to an essential service, upping the ante by taking the industrial action or threatening the industrial action themselves.
The same day Qantas resumed flights 2 weeks ago, its CEO Alan Joyce claimed his tactics had been applauded by business colleagues.
I've been overwhelmed by the support I'm getting from the business community. Nearly every major CEO in the country has given us a letter of support with the courageous decisions we've made to resolve this.
That might be part of the sort of ideological response or debate, but I've met a lot of CEOs who are very upset that their staff weren't able to fly to work or to carry out their business as a result of the shutdown of the airline. So I've had some quite different experiences in that regard.
It's not in the federal government's interest for the Qantas dispute to set a precedent pursued by other employers. Its review of the Fair Work Act in the new year may result in changes to strengthen, for example, provisions for good faith bargaining.
If there are any issues with the Act where we think they're not meeting the objectives, clearly this process will show that up and we'll respond.
I think it's far more likely now that we'll see some changes coming out of this upcoming review of the Fair Work Act than if the Qantas dispute hadn't escalated in the way that it did. I think that has changed the political climate.
I think that we have to be very careful that this isn't ongoing, and I think the Fair Work Act has to put in safeguards to make sure that it's not used again as a strategy into the future.
The union movement admits it may have to rethink its strategies as well. In the meantime, the Victorian government has upped the ante tonight, producing case studies it claims shows patients are suffering.
One case that I note particularly, a man in his late 60s was admitted to a ward after waiting for 50 hours in the emergency department with stroke-like symptoms.
We don't believe that we are causing harm to the health and welfare of the Victorian community. Our bans are different this time than previous enterprise agreements. We have 12 areas that are exempt from the action, including our emergency cubicles, haematology, oncology, palliative care, intensive care, coronary care, maternity patients.
There are no winners in this dispute yet. Fair Work Australia will hear the application for termination of industrial action tomorrow morning. You can bet state governments and authorities and big corporations around the country will be watching the results very closely.
And as with the Qantas dispute, Fair Work Australia is expected to make a decision pretty quickly, so a result won't be far off. Heather Hewitt with that report.